Okay, thank you, Mr. King.
Thank you very much. Right. So you could take up, please, then, Mr. Singleton, your bundle of appendices 1 and appendix 5, please. And Mr. Robertson's report in relation to the Cornwall proposal.
Yes.
And go to paragraph 2078, please. A number of points arise here, and we'll try and there is slightly different points in the cross-examination, but we'll try and deal them all together. First of all, we can see from paragraph 2078 that the inspector looked at studies from other parts of the country.
Yes.
Why did he do that?
Well, to see what the evidence was for any actual adverse impact in terms of the economic investment or the tariff to investment based on actual experience elsewhere.
From your point of view, was that an appropriate or inappropriate thing to do?
It's sensible and appropriate thing to do.
In this case, what did the council's witness, Mrs. Harding, do with regard to producing reports about somewhere else in order to say what the impact of this proposal would be in Trafford?
Yes, Mrs. Harding certainly took that same approach and produced in her evidence and appended in full the new Labour study which we talked about, and of course that was also relied upon by one of the Free Clean Air Group's witnesses as well.
Right. As far as the Cornwall decision is concerned, and as to Mr. Robertson's conclusion as to whether or not there is any evidence that EFW plants have any adverse effect on a local economy or performance of the local economy, adverse performance, what was his conclusion?
His conclusion was that there was no evidence to support that.
Right. Now the next point taken from this report was to ask you, well, it was actually an earlier point, I think it's phrased as part of 2075, to ask you about the approach that the inspector had taken with regard to views from the proposal, and to point out that, well, Mr. Robertson was making it pretty clear, paraphrasing Mr. Fraser's much more elegant way of expressing it, that he didn't think much of the view as it was, and he didn't think the proposal would have much impact on a view he wasn't very impressed with anyway. Mm-hmm. Yes? So, absence of impact in the context of the proposal. Just take up the statement of common ground, would you please, in this case. Statement of common ground, page 43. And 43. Paragraph 911. This is the concluding paragraph of the section of the Statement of Common Ground dealing with landscape and visual impact.
Yes.
It says, the findings of the environmental statement with regards to landscape and visual impact have not been challenged, and it is agreed that the proposed development would not give rise to any significant impacts in respect of landscape and visual amenity.
Yes.
Yes. If we just turn over the page to paragraph 920, the concluding paragraph dealing with external design tells us, it is agreed that the design of the development responds to the site setting and constraints and successfully integrates the proposal into its physical setting and provides an attractive frontage to the ship canal.
Yes.
Yes. Now, on the basis of what we've agreed with the council here, what's your opinion, please? Is there any foundation for suggesting that this proposal would have some different and adverse visual impacts in a way that the proposal in Cornwall didn't?
No.
then need your rebuttal appendices. And Appendix A,
Yes.
which is the inspector's report we now know all about.
Yes.
Why did you produce this report, or in response to what evidence is it, please?
Yes, this is produced as a rebuttal to Mrs. Harding's evidence.
And in particular,
And
what in Mrs.
Well, in
Harding's
particular, her reliance on the New Haven study.
And if we look in this document, please, first of all, to 2237 on page 122.
Yes.
To sum up on this issue, the draft plan envisages that an EFW plant could only be developed at North Quay if it satisfied all the environmental health and amenity policies in the plan,
Yes.
gained an IPVC permit, and was of a high standard of design. Yes?
Yes.
We know that the inspector left the waste treatment element in the plan, didn't specify it,
Yes.
and left open the option of a thermal treatment plant.
Yes, the option is left open. It's not specified in the application, as I understand it.
Yes.
Yeah.
In the circumstances that we've got here, and again, bearing in mind the inspector's conclusions there relating to particular site circumstances, we've got an EFW plant which has gained an IPVC permit, is accepted to be of a high standard of design, and with regard to all statutory consultees, has satisfied all environmental health and amenity policies.
That's correct.
Yes. The inspector's conclusions then at this inquiry as to the lack of impact of proposals of this kind with regard to the local economy, can they be relied upon, or should they be rejected on the basis that these conclusions were dependent on things which have not been resolved in this case?
No, they can be relied upon.
Would you then back to, in the same report, to page 119?
Yes.
And I'm only doing this because I think it should draw the inspector's attention to it. The 22, 22 and following
Yes.
is the inspector moving on to consider the, as he puts it, the incinerator issue. And at 223, should the policy therefore exclude an incinerator if it were proposed to look like, and so on?
Yes. Yes.
Well, we've just seen what ours will look like and how it might be characterised. And over the page, he deals, I think, with other aspects of, as he puts it, the architectural challenge.
Yes.
And points out at 22, 24, incinerator would be more problematic because of its size and prominence of the site from some viewpoints, but the need was shown, I believe, possible to meet the design challenge.
Yes.
In relation to our site, and in agreement with the council, has the design challenge been met or not?
It has been met.
And more particularly as to the principal reason for producing this inspector's report, did the inspector accept on any basis any element of the study relied on by the council and Mrs. Harding's evidence?
Not, in my understanding, reading this report, no.
The cross-examination progressed beyond that to put to you the proposition that perception was material.
Yes.
And perception would affect investors and investor confidence.
Yes, I recall that.
Can you help me, please, as to where in the Council's evidence I find anything from any investor or any indication of any scheme where any investor has been deterred to any degree by any element of this proposal?
There is no evidence in the Council's submission.
If there's no evidence with regard to that matter, what do you say about the impact of the absence of that evidence on any question of perception?
Well, given the very extensive and largely adverse publicity that proposals had over the timescales that we have looked at, the absence of any evidence to that effect, I think, should be taken into account by the inspector to demonstrate that risk does not exist.
You're clearly getting good at this, Mr. Singleton, because that's the very next thing I wanted to ask you about. That is the very largely adverse publicity.
Well, indeed.
Just to ask you to take up your proof of evidence, please. In your main proof of evidence. Go, if you would, to section 13, which starts on page 76.
Yes.
And the quickest way of dealing with this would be to ask you simply to read paragraph 13.4, please.
It is pertinent to note that the complaint was made on Field's behalf to the Advertising Standards Agency in January 2011. That much of the literature and other material that had been circulated by BCAG in respect to the air quality and health impact of the proposed development was inaccurate and misleading. Following their subsequent discussions with the ASA, BCAG agreed to withdraw all material, including claims about these impacts that had been distributed to local residents and businesses and had been posted online in the period from October of 2010 and the 2nd of March 2011. Notwithstanding that withdrawal, it is, in my view, still the case that BCAG have played a major part in creating anxiety, apprehension and fear within the local community and in generating the perception of adverse health impacts which are referred to in the second reason for refusal.
Having reached this stage of the inquiry, Mr. Singleton, have you seen or heard anything which causes you to think you should modify the view you've expressed in paragraph 13.4?
Not at all, sir.
The economic benefits of the proposal, you quantified the construction element as being £70 million.
Yes, the capital cost investment, £70 million investment.
We haven't, it's quite correct, as Mr. Fraser points out, produced evidence as to the extent to which that might, as it were, be spent locally.
No.
So we leave others to form a judgment on that. But as to that overall figure, against the background of policy advice that the inspector would be very familiar with about encouraging investment, how significant an investment do you regard £70 million as being in this area, please?
Very significant. I struggle to think of another project that is currently being promoted in this region which would approach that scale of investment. It is a very, very substantial level of investment.
Then we need to just consider some aspects of the Blue NG decision, or document 150.
I still have that.
Good. first point, Mr. Singleton, if a whole borough is covered by an AQMA,
yes.
what, if anything, does that tell you about air quality across the whole of the borough?
Well, it tells us that the air quality is the emissions levels are above the thresholds for designation as an air quality management area. So therefore, there are significant issues across the whole of the borough in terms of air quality.
In terms, therefore, of residents' opportunities to, for example, enjoy leisure or recreation or anything of that kind outside of areas which are adversely affected, what's the position if a whole borough is covered?
There would be no opportunity within the borough at all.
Whilst considering the blue energy discussion, you had a discussion with Mr. Fraser about the locational criteria, and
yes.
you referred to EN3.
Yes.
And whether we were in an appropriate location.
Yes.
Just take up again the statement of common ground, would you please? Actually, we may be able to do it a slightly shorter way with the regional strategy direct, because we've looked at that. If you go direct to the regional strategy, I beg your pardon, core document 63.
63. Yes.
And page 106, please.
Yes.
Policy EM12
yes.
sets out locational principles.
Yes, it does.
I'm not going to read it out, but its heading, as it were, gives the game away. It's about where to put things.
Yes, the third location. Yes.
Waste planning and disposal authorities provide, and so on.
Yes.
Yes. Sorry, Mr. Richards, page 106.
Policy EM12.
And this is one of the policies which it's agreed the proposal complies with.
Yes, the common ground statement agrees that we are in compliance.
And with regard to the waste plan, that is the Joint Waste Development Plan document, will it have been prepared in conformity with this or not in conformity with
no,
this?
the waste plan has to be in conformity with this, otherwise it would not be adopted, passed for adoption by the inspector.
So in terms of whether we're in the right place in relation to locational criteria identified in policy EM12, the statement of common ground gives us the answer to that.
It does, absolutely.
And in terms of the waste plan, we have policy 10.
Yes.
And the response to that we've got, and you referred to yesterday.
Yes, we've been through that, the GMGU who have prepared that plan, are the custodians of that plan, are satisfied that we meet all relevant criteria policies.
So if we're concerned to ask in relation to spatially specific policies, that is policies which apply in this area,
yes,
regionally and then in Greater Manchester, whether this proposal is in the right place in accordance with the development plan, what's the answer, please?
Well, the answer would be yes, and that is part of the overall policy compliance, which I spoke of yesterday.
Was the Blue Energy proposal able to claim such a happy compliance with relevant policies in an up-to-date development plan?
No, it wasn't.
How significant is the ability to comply with up-to-date relevant policies in a development plan in the decision-making process?
It's absolutely critical, because the starting point for consideration of any application or appeal is the development plan. We've looked at the framework and everything that flows from that.
Go then, would you please, to the Inspector's report, Mr. Barton's report in Blue NG.
Yes.
And go to section 10, section 10.3, dealing with air quality.
Yes.
10.3.3 you were taken to, yes, where the inspector drew attention to a UDP policy with regard to hindering the achievement of air quality objectives.
Yes.
Yes. And at the end of the paragraph, Mr. Barton says it accepts, that is PPS 23, air quality is likely to be particularly important where granting planning permission would conflict with or render unworkable elements of the local authority's air quality action plan.
Yes.
In terms of hindering achievement of air quality objectives or rendering unworkable elements of the local authority's air quality action plan, what's the position here, please?
That objection does not exist here.
Go, would you please, to 10.3.7.
Yes.
This is to do with nitrogen dioxide levels. But in that instance, we note partway through the paragraph, the site's location closer to background pollution sources such as the railway and motorways,
yes,
and Heathrow Airport make improving air quality a challenge.
Yes.
Have we got the challenges of railway and the country's largest airport in this instance?
No.
In the course of going through these paragraphs, Mr. Fraser drew attention to the fact that Mr. Barton referred to the modelling uncertainties which existed in that case.
Yes.
Do you recollect?
I do.
Have a look at the paragraph, the end, I beg your pardon, the paragraph 10.3.8, would you please?
Yes.
He says, the modelling under-predicted the measured results by a factor of 9.49. And whilst this may not be unusual, I consider that it indicates that the predicted results should be treated with some caution.
Yes.
Are you aware of any evidence in this case? Have you heard any evidence in this case which would demonstrate that the modelling here is under-predicting by a factor of nearly 10?
No, I've not seen any suggestion in evidence, written or oral, to that effect.
You were taken to paragraph 10.3.14. And in particular, the penultimate sentence of 10.3.14, even if background levels have been underestimated, only one receptor would increase from slight adverse to moderate adverse. See that?
Yes.
Mr. Fraser, forgive me saying so, translated that as to there would only be one moderate adverse receptor. But is that what the sentence is telling us? There would only be one moderate adverse, or is it telling us that there'd only be one that would increase?
Yes.
From minor to moderate?
Yes, on reading the sentence, I think that is the right, right interpretation of what it says.
10.3.15, you were asked some questions about population.
Yes.
I'm not sure if the point was actually directly put to you. One of the things that troubled Mr. Barton about this proposal, middle of the paragraph,
yes,
was that many people would be affected in this densely populated area.
Yes.
Mr. Fraser may not put it. I want you to tell the inspector, in your view, please, what's the position here? Are we dealing with a densely populated area relative to this proposal?
No, I produced evidence, which again I don't think has been challenged, that this is the Barton site sits in a very different area in terms of population density. It is clear that the Southall site, when you look at the plan and the information that we submitted with regard to the population, that it is very much more densely populated.
If we double the distance used in the waste plan in order to select sites from the point of view of proximity to residential receptors. So we double the 250 and say, well, let's have a look at 500 as an excess of caution. How many dwellings are there within 500 metres of this proposal?
Well, so there are no dwellings within 500 metres. The nearest dwelling is the farmhouse, and you haven't yet got the plan, I don't think. I think the distance agreed now between the council and ourselves is that distance is 520. 520 metres. I'm sure the council will correct me, but I understand that's the agreed position. The group of housing...
That's from the staff to the rear garden.
That's from the... We'll give you the plan, sir, so you can have it. But it's been agreed, I think, during the course of my getting evidence.
The relevant distance is 5.
The relevant distance for the nearest single property is 520. To the nearest group of properties to which we referred before, I think, is about 550.
In those circumstances...
Well...
500. Well, Mr. Fraser, I'm quite happy if it's 500. It doesn't make any difference at all.
Well, I've not been involved in discussions. That's what I was advised. But you'll have the plan, sir.
Don't let's trouble. If it's 500, not 520, it doesn't make any difference to my point at all.
Well, if it also serves our position that it's 490.
All right. Well, there we are. Any more bids?
Any more bids?
But the serious point is this. The waste plan is, you said, prepared on the basis of the 250, the SA done on that basis. If we double it to 500, we've got nil.
Yes.
Using, therefore, a parameter which the council itself, or the GMGU on behalf of the council, was using, what evidence is there that would support the view that this should be regarded as, within the relevant area, a densely populated area?
Well, no evidence at all. The information that we provided shows that there are no people in that 500 metres.
And then if we go to Mr. Barton's 10.317.
Yes.
The reference at the end of the paragraph to the 3 wards closest to the site. Yes?
Yes.
We know what the position is in relation to the 3 wards closest to the site. Has the council produced evidence relevant to those wards to show levels of deprivation of the kind referred to by Mr. Barton?
No, the evidence that's being produced by Mrs. Harding shows a very different position in terms of levels of deprivation. And as I've said, both in my rebuttal and in evidence in chief, those data sets actually show that the 3 wards are performing very well, generally, against the indices of deprivation.
One of the things that troubled Mr. Barton was that he had evidence which indicated that there was poor health among these fairly deprived wards. In this instance, looking to the authority who might be expected to have such information and be ready, willing and able to make it available, is there any such evidence from the local health authority?
There's no evidence in the council's submission or evidence or proofs. I think the only information is that which was attached to the consultation response from the health authority, which is in the inquiry papers.
If we just step back a moment, one of the things that PPS 10 tells us is about the important role of the Environment Agency, paragraph 27.
Yes.
It also tells us at paragraph 31 about the important role of the health protection and local health authorities, health protection agency and local health authorities.
Yes, it does.
Yeah. In Blue NG, we know, as a matter of fact now, there was no permit and no Environment Agency sign-off.
I think there was no permit and not even an application for a permit.
So no permit, no application and no Environment Agency sign-off.
Yes.
There was apparently no HBA consultation reply available.
That does appear to be the situation. Yes.
and we don't seem to have had any response from the local health authorities.
There's nothing referred to in the inspector's report I can see.
Bearing in mind the Secretary of State's guidance in PPS 10 about the role of the agency, the role of the Health Protection Agency, and the role of the local health authority, how important are those factors in your view?
Well, they're clearly very, very important in terms of the Secretary of State's policy on how sections of health impacts should be dealt with in the inquiry process and the decision-making process.
Thank you very much, Mr. Singleton. I have nothing else to ask you.
Thank you, Mr. Kingston. Okay, well, we've given it a very thorough going over one way or another.
Yes. In Shakespearean terms, we've had a great deal of throwing about of brains, I think is what you would say.
We certainly had that, and thank you very much for that. I just want to put the question that I put to Mrs. Harding about the relative weight to be attributable to the factors that might influence the housing market, and there are a number of factors that might influence the housing market. One is the general economic climate.
Yes.
There may be many others. One would be a proposal such as this.
Yes.
And I wonder how you would recommend that I attributed weight.
Well, so clearly the general economic conditions are, certainly in recent experience, are the most significant factor. There is a whole a raft of contributing factors to that. It's not just about the general economy, it's also about the basis on which access to mortgage facilities can now be achieved, the level of deposit that's required. All of those factors clearly are critical. No matter where the house is located and how attractive it is, house builders can't sell it unless they purchaser can access the funds to buy. So that's a critical factor. And of course, the purchaser has to be in an appropriate position in terms of having an income stream in order to pay those mortgage payments. So that's the most critical factor, I think. As I said in my evidence, the impact of a proposal like this certainly could be material. And I'm sure could be examples of where a proposal of this sort has had an adverse effect on the housing market. So I think it is a consideration. As I said in my evidence, based on Mr. Havington's report, I don't think there is any evidence that the proposal in its emerging form, with all the adverse publicity that you will have seen has been spoken about, has had that negative effect.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Mr. King.
I have a note. I don't want to invite more questions. I have a mental note that you're going to ask me about the ecology unit.
Good point. Good point. The relationship between the Greater Manchester Ecology Unit and English Lecture.
Well, the ecology unit is of the same type of institution as GNGU, which you will have seen. You've heard of reference to.
Yeah.
These specialist
the
skills.
legal authority is there.
Yeah, the skills used to be within the Greater Manchester County, and when GMC was done away with in 1986, the 10 districts decided they would like to retain central specialist skills services, and the GNEU is one of those. So it's a specialist set of knowledge and skills which provides advice to all of the districts on planning applications on ecology matters.
Is it provided by a private sector?
No, it's changed. Originally, it was effectively the team that used to sit in GNC sitting in somebody else's office, but obviously over time, so it's maintained and financed by the authorities together. It's not a joint authority in the way that the waste disposal authority is, but it is a specialist advisory service which is funded by I think all 10 districts actually in respect of ecology. So it's there to provide officers in the 10 local planning authorities with that specialist advice. So it has a very different role to English Nature. It's not a statutory quantity. It's an internal skill set, if I can characterise it that way.
Okay, thanks very much for that.
Thank you, sir.
That's very helpful. Thank you, Mr. Fraser, Mr. Kingston, Mr. Cunnington. Okay.
So there is just one matter outstanding as far as I'm concerned. You'll recollect I invited Mrs. Harding to consider the calculations in paragraph 6.8.4 of her proof. And I can't say I'm waiting with bated breath, but I'm waiting with some interest to see what the answer is. If it's available, please. Page 55, paragraph 6.8.4.
The last paragraph says, at the moment it says a total of 796 people in the area are economically impacted. Actually, 398.
398, thank you.
And that equates to 34.6%.
Thank you.
34.6.
So,
Apologies for that miscalculation.
not at all. So that then gives us our 1147 consistent with the total. Thank you, that's very helpful. And
it would help, actually, could you put that in a note that can be circulated then, and I can make the document.
it's obviously quite an important change in the figure,
okay.
because...
what I was proposing to do, I mean, we have received a number of documents which I haven't itemised on a daily basis, but I'll produce a list over the weekend and circulate it and hopefully seek agreement as to...
We are going to provide you with a response, you'll recollect, with regard to Dr. Ravi's papers, so they will provide that, and that I hope will be available shortly.
Okay, and as soon as that can be circulated by email...
I will circulate it so as soon as possible.
Thank you very much. Okay. Mr. Cliff.
May I address the fact that at the planning committee meeting last year, the last question was this: is a biomass incinerator going to be sustainable as we head toward the zero waste society of 2020? Thank you.
Okay. Will you be making a statement later, Mr. Cliff?
I hope not.
You hope not. Okay. No.
If
The
you
gentleman
want me
sitting
to, I
back
will.
there.
Could I just raise a general question? I've been sitting in various sessions over the last 2 weeks, particularly at the beginning of the inquiry last week. Much concern was raised by local residents as to the height of the stack, 44.2 metres, I believe. The reason given was the presence of Barton Airport. Now, I've heard from two separate sources entirely independently over the last few days, who I've spoken to about this, what I've been doing, attending the inquiry. But Barton Airport's going to close. Is that so? If so, why is the height of the stack still limited to 40?
Well, I have no information on that.
No, I'm asking Peel, who owns the airport.
Well, could you ask Peel outside of the inquiry, if you don't mind, if that's okay? You can have any discussion you like, and they can give you any answer.
But if the height of the stack could be increased, then a lot of these concerns could be mitigated.
Thank you. Tim, may I say I've got a copy of the section 106, the unilateral undertaking for you here.
Is it signed and dated?
Yes, it is.
Yeah.
Yes, it is. Both.
Okay, well, I do want to have a discussion about that. What I was going to suggest is that we did that after we'd had the public speakers tomorrow.
Well, may I give you this now,
certainly.
and then you've got it.
Okay. Along with the conditions. I mean, and then after that, we've had various discussions about the site visit. I would be happy to use what daylight hours are available to us tomorrow after we finish the business here, which will be effectively after we've heard from the public and discussed conditions. I'd be happy to use the rest of the day to do what part of the site visit we can do. Otherwise, I would be equally happy to park that until Wednesday after closings. But, that's just my suggestion, so I'll take it.
No, I just want to raise another matter, actually. So I think Mr. Watson has been dealing with Mr. Oathen outside the inquiry on this one. I think there is going to be a note from Mr. Oathen. Just so that we don't forget, I think there is going to be a note from Mr. Oathen dealing with a point which I think arose partly out of a question you asked, which is about the NOx oxidation at night.
Oh yes, we've got. I think Mr. Oatham thinks he got something the wrong way round, but it doesn't affect the substance. But you ought to have.
Okay, but I need to be
I'll provide you with it.
Yeah.
Can I just ask, sir, if we're going to finish all the members of the public who wish to speak, finish their contributions tomorrow morning sometime, and we've had our discussion on conditions and undertakings, is there some reason why we shouldn't close on Tuesdays?
I don't think there's any reason why we shouldn't close on Tuesday. And certainly not as far as I'm concerned.
Good.
All I was suggesting was that the site visit, we could do the whole of the site visit on Wednesday if that suits people better. But that's a matter for Mr. Kilbert, Mr.
Yes.
Gentleman.
Well, everyone's working to provide you with, at least from our point of view, we're working to provide you with an agreed plan. Yeah. And then most of it, from our point of view, we're perfectly happy unaccompanied, which would be much easier for you than tracing around. We'll just give you a plan with points we'd like you to note in the particular locations. And then, as far as we're concerned, I think the only accompanied bit would need to be on-site, if you want to go back on site.
Okay. Well, I think there have been other discussions between Mr. Kilbert and Mr. Is it Mr. England?
Yes.
Yeah. As to what will be accompanied and what won't. So
All right. We'll wait for that.
Okay.
Thank you very much, Steve.
Okay, well, we're adjourned then. We have a public session at 6:30. Who's going to be here? You'll be here?
Yes, I should be here.
Mr. Fraser, you'll be here. Mr. Cummington? Yeah, okay. So we'll adjourn until 6:30.
Thank you very much.